This is Mrs. Workman. She's our Educational Support Director. Education support is what we call our special education department. It is made up of her and 3 other full-time teachers. When I asked Mrs. Workman, what makes a great special education teacher? She said, well, more than the paperwork, that's for sure. I guess that's my interpretation of it. She said it's about using wisdom to recognize what's going on with each individual student, helping them to recognize their strengths and teaching them to be totally okay with who they are, even while they work to overcome academic deficits. I thought that was great. She reminded me that it really is about the wonderful students and not to get too bogged down with all the paperwork. Fortunately, here in Cambodia, we're not after federal dollars for our program, so paperwork can be significantly minimized. Of course, without those federal dollars, we have very limited special education resources. Mrs. Workman says that the IEPs, well, we actually call them PEPs, Personal Education Plans. That's because a British guy heads up our special education department, and that happens to be what they call them in the UK. Anyways, she says that the IEPs affect the classroom environment only so far as the classroom teacher will properly implement the stated accommodations and modifications. She said that our school has excellent compliance in the elementary level and moderate compliance in the middle and high school grades. She said mostly accommodations impact the classroom setting when students with IEPs have special arrangements with the teachers and the class environment. So, for example, due to this student's learning disability, one of the students is allowed to opt out of group work, put on headphones, and engage with learning tasks on his own. This has to do with a learning disability he has where he gets significantly distracted or he has distraction issues that makes it very challenging for him to complete work in a social or loud classroom environment. Mrs. Workman creates the IEPs at our school. In fact, just this year, she trained the other SPED teachers to fill them out the way she prefers and expects, and then reviews them before final signatures. She still writes the IEPs for her elementary students, but allows the other SPED teachers to write them for their students. Since we do not have federal guidelines that we must comply to, it is Mrs. Workman who ensures that our SPED department, along with its products like IEPs, for example, reflect best practices and guidelines that would be acceptable in the U.S. The process and cycle in our school is quite standard. A student is referred to Mrs. Workman by a parent or a classroom teacher. Mrs. Workman will interview and then give them some initial tests. If the tests seem to indicate a learning disability, Mrs. Workman will refer them to an educational psychologist that she knows well in Bangkok, Thailand, just about an hour away from us. Mrs. Workman will confer with the educational psychologist via email, receive the student's file, and review for initial IEP meeting. Mrs. Workman will write the IEP and then conduct a meeting with parents, student, classroom teachers, and the appropriate administrator, either the high school or the elementary principal. The IEP will be agreed upon and signed and immediately implemented in the classroom. Each IEP is reviewed during the months of April and May, which happen to be the last 2 months of our school year, and changes are made for the following school year. New teachers are informed of the IEP for the next school year. And that is our IEP process here at Logos. That about wraps up this interview with our incredible Mrs. Workman, our Educational Support Staff Director.